You know what? I think they got some spark notes on this book and they said, okay, let's run with that, and then changed everything. Hello? Hi, my name is Chloe Jane and welcome to my channel where we talk about books, movies, series. Today's a fun video because we are doing a book to film comparison for P.S. I Still Love You, which is the second book slash movie in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series. So I just finished watching the film and I have a reaction video posted if you want to go check that out. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of mad. I'm not gonna lie, watching that film like actually put me in a bad mood. And this is the whole reason I wanted to start doing book to film comparisons on my channel, because I love reading, but I also love filmmaking. And anytime I have a book series or a book that I really love and it gets announced that it's going to be adapted to a film or a series, I get so worried because so many times my favorite books get adapted and it's literally terrible. And so that's why I wanted to do this series in the first place, because the first film, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, I think is so accurate to the book. I think it's so well done. It brings it in a new life, but it still is really true to the original source material. However, this film, the second film, can't say the same. I don't know what I just watched, but it was not this. It was not this. But before we get into it and we break everything down, we did a drinking game for my reaction video, and honestly, we didn't really drink that much.
Rude if I... Well, it's not about Jen.
So I thought we could do a drinking game for this video as well, just to make it a little bit more fun. I will not be drinking with you because I'm out. So I just thought it'd be fun for you guys. So I think every time I say these words, you guys can take a drink if you want to join in the game. So anytime I say the word Genevieve or Jen, whichever, anytime I say the word John Ambrose, anytime I say the word Stormy, and anytime I say the word treehouse, okay? And anytime I say the word childhood. That's a lot. That's a lot. So Genevieve, John Ambrose, Stormy, treehouse, childhood. You're drinking. I will start off by saying, for the most part, I like the production design for the films. I think the costumes for Lara Jean, for the most part, look really good and they're pretty true to her character. And I love all the blues and the yellows and the colors of the films. Even like the look of the film is very distinct and it's cohesive through all three of the films, even though we haven't watched the third film, but I know it's going to be. So I do like that. I'll appreciate that about the film. And I'll also say I love the opening scene of Lara Jean. She's dancing around her room and she's establishing now she's in a relationship. This is her first relationship and she's just kind of daydreaming, singing, and I love this because it kind of mirrors the opening shot from the first film where she's fantasizing in her head while she's reading her book and she's in a field. But this time she's in a relationship and she's just romanticizing her life, and it's very her. It's a great introduction into the movie because it's showing us she's still her character, even though she's in a relationship and she's changed. And the song that she's dancing to is an older song, which I thought was going to tie in to the other theme within the story of love in the olden days and this big party that they throw that's set in the 40s and they're dressing up and they're almost like cosplaying as lovers from the 40s. So I thought that was intentional, but to my surprise, that scene was never in there. Why was that whole aspect of the book not included in this film? I mean, a big portion of this film was at the retirement home, so I feel like that could have easily been incorporated more. The theme of love in the olden days versus love now, which we kind of had a little bit of that whenever they were looking at these old letters that they found in the basement. But still, it was not. In the book, Lara Jean brings up this subject to Peter and she says, don't you like how dating was in the old-fashioned days? It was more casual dating, so therefore it was more meaningful when the guy would give the girl his pen, and then when they were serious it was a lot more meaningful because the girls had more options and they were dating around more. And so he's confused by this and he says, so you want to date other people? And this sets the tone for the whole rest of the film, because at this point they're already having problems because of Peter and Jen, and now Lara Jean's planting the seed in his head of, don't you wish dating was more casual? So as she starts talking to John Ambrose, this is already in Peter's mind because she said this. It sets the whole tone for the whole film. And I also like the whole old-fashioned thing because it kind of goes back to book 1, film 1, with the whole theme of Lara Jean loves to romanticize life and she loves the idea of things. So in book 1, she always loved to read about love and she loved romance movies, but she was always scared of it herself because when it was real, it was scary to her. And she's doing a similar thing in this book, is she's using love from a different time period and romanticizing it and kind of using it as a form of escapism in a way, and just daydreaming about it and saying, oh, wasn't it so much more romantic, as opposed to realizing what she has right in front of her when she's actually in a relationship, which is another theme of this book, when things are real, when relationships are real, which I'll get more into later. But that's why I think the whole old-fashioned love aspect was so important, and I really wish we would have seen it. Not to mention the whole party with John Ambrose and Lara Jean was supposed to be set in the 40s. What did they change it to in the movie? The Star Ball, something with stars. For what purpose? Even if they didn't want to fully lean into old-fashioned love and this comparison between love now and love then, they still could have incorporated it just a little bit by having the theme of the party be from the past decade. Some other issues with the film stem from the fact that they, in the first film, included elements from the second film. So then when we go to the second film, we've already talked about these things. So they don't really have them, they can't really fully explore them in the second film, even though they kind of could, but they kind of already did it in the first film, so now they're kind of like, One of those things being the hot tub video, because in the first film, we had that as the third act conflict, a part of the third act conflict, but we also resolved everything at the same time. We had everybody making fun of them at school, and Peter kind of standing up for them. We had her confronting Jen about it. We had Margot taking the video down, so they resolved everything. But the issue for that is that in this book, in the second book, the hot tub video was still such a big point of conflict for them. In fact, it becomes part of the reason that they start to drift in the first place within this book, and that they have all these issues in the relationship, because Lara Jean is so dead set on the fact that Jen is the one that took that video, but Peter keeps defending Jen. So the fact that we don't have that element, which they did kind of include it into the film, I'll give them that. We have a scene in class where Lara Jean briefly mentions the video and she says, well, Jen took it, and Peter just kind of says, well, you don't know that. And then we move on. It's very brief, right? But the thing is, at this point in the film, nobody was really making fun of the hot tub video anymore. It was all in the past. We resolved everything in the first film. So at this point, it's almost kind of randomly dropped in there, and it doesn't make sense because they were still being harassed about this video, and that's why Lara Jean is so dead set on finding out that Jen is the one who did it, and why she's so upset that Peter doesn't believe her. So yeah, the hot tub video was an issue because they kind of already did it in the first film, but it was kind of hard to figure out and navigate how are we going to include this in the second film. Another example of this is the new contract that they make in the book. So at the end of the first film, whenever they have their scene at the end where they're doing their big love confession and they get back together, Lara Jean says something along the lines of, okay, well, what do we put in this contract for a relationship? And Peter says something along the lines of, you don't need rules when you're in a relationship. So they don't do a contract. However, in this book, they make a new contract for the relationship. And the reason that this is important is because they make two rules that are mentioned and brought up throughout the entire book. The rules are, we'll promise to never break each other's hearts, and we'll promise to always tell each other the truth. So in the film, they did include this promise of we'll never break each other's hearts, but they didn't include we'll always tell each other the truth. But that is very important because both Peter and Lara Jean are keeping secrets from each other this whole book. So it's like, okay, they didn't have to do the contract. They didn't do that in the film. They still did the thing about let's not break each other's hearts. Might as well throw in the thing about the honesty too, because that was very important for this film. Now I'm gonna get into my biggest issue with this film, and that would be Genevieve. So in book 2, Genevieve plays a huge role. And in the film, this is not showcased enough. It's shown, it's definitely shown, but not in the same way that it's shown in the book. So in the book, from the very beginning, Peter and Genevieve are still hanging out, they're still calling, they're still texting while him and Lara Jean are in this relationship. Mind you, they've signed the contract that says we're gonna be honest with each other. But Peter's being pretty sneaky, or not sneaky, but he's not being completely transparent to Lara Jean about why he's still hanging out with Genevieve. And so now she's starting to get worried because he keeps constantly hanging out with Genevieve. And she tries to ask him, just tell me, like, what's the issue? Like, do you still have feelings for her? But he says no, she's dealing with some family stuff and I can't really tell you the reason why. And by the way, this conflict between them goes all the way back to the first book, because this happens to where he was hanging out with Genevieve and Lara Jean confronted him about it in the first book, and he said, don't make me choose between you and her because I can't not be there for her. So this has been an issue, and it's even worse in this book, clearly, so because he keeps hanging out with her. So he won't tell her what the issue is with Jen. So obviously that's gonna bother Lara Jean because her boyfriend is hanging out with his ex and he won't give her a reason why. This is the start, alongside the hot tub video and him not taking her side, this is the other point of conflict, is he's not being honest with her, which is what they promised, right? So now Lara Jean is starting to get all these insecurities about Genevieve, and she keeps comparing herself to Genevieve. And I wonder why. He's hanging out with his ex. And so now the entire book, every single thing that they do together, she compares herself to Genevieve. And they do show this in the film. So I will give them credit for that. I liked how they showed this in the film with Lara Jean's delusions in her head whenever she sees these like fake conversations with people. She had the same thing with Genevieve where she was comparing herself to Genevieve. So I liked how they showed that. However, without showing that Peter and Genevieve were still hanging out and texting and being really close to each other, and Peter being sneaky about it and not being completely transparent about it, it's not enough for her to just compare herself to Genevieve to then have this be the only conflict between them, you know? Because now that conflict is all put on Lara Jean and it's all self-inflicted. It's her own, in the film, it's her own insecurities that is the conflict, when that's not the case. Peter played a huge part in it. He was a huge part of why they drifted apart and why their relationship was having issues. Not only that, there's this whole theme throughout the entire book about Lara Jean and Genevieve kind of being tied to each other, and you know, it all stems from them being really close friends and then growing up and growing out of that friendship and hating each other. So at the end of the film, there's a scene with Lara Jean and Genevieve where they resolve things. And they're in the treehouse, they meet up, and we see the bracelet that Genevieve hid from Lara Jean from the time capsule. That was all in the book, and I really liked that, and I'm glad they included it. However, this scene of them resolving things at the end wasn't done well enough because there wasn't enough issues about them and their friendship. Yes, they talk about how Lara Jean was comparing herself to Genevieve, but we didn't even see any aspects from their childhood together. They should have, if they really did want to have the scene at the end where they resolve things and for it to work, we needed to see some kind of flashback scene or something of her and Genevieve when they were younger and why they had issues. Like, it was just randomly placed at the end of the film. All we had was her comparing herself to Genevieve and then them becoming friends again at the end. Because in the book, there's a lot of scenes where she talks about how close they used to be as friends, and it's clearly a heavy thought on her mind, which also plays into the theme of growing up. That's my issues with Jen and Peter and Jen and Lara Jean. And another reason why Lara Jean compares herself to Genevieve so much is because Peter is also a part of this problem. He says this one line in the book that kind of like switches her mentality for the rest of the story, where she's now constantly comparing herself to Jen and being insecure. So they're talking about him and Jen, and he says, "You're different." She says, "How am I different?" And he says, "You're easy to be with. You don't get me all crazy and worked up." So this triggers her because she says, "What the hell? I want to make a boy go crazy over me," because mind you, she's being influenced by her new mentor, Stormy, who's telling her all these stories of, yes, you should have all these lovers and all of this. So now she's thinking, she's having this warped view of how she thinks love should be, and she's saying, what? I want to make a boy crazy. I want this passion. I want this romance. Even though Peter's really just saying, like, you're easier to be with, like, we're more compatible, we don't have as much conflict, and we're good together. That's what I think he was trying to say. And she says, what the hell? I want to make a boy crazy. So now this is a new thought in her mind that she's just replaying the whole book of, oh my gosh, he's not crazy about me. This conversation wasn't in the movie at all, but I wish it was slipped in there somewhere just to show that Peter also is kind of planting those seeds of insecurity in Lara Jean. It's not completely one-sided from her. There's reasons why she is having these thoughts. Same with the whole thing with Stormy. I wish that they would have made Stormy lean a little bit more onto her views of love and her like relationship advice and how that's warping Lara Jean's mentality and her view on love, and why she's like feeling the need to date around and feeling the need to go back to love from a different time and feeling the need to have options. Let's talk about Valentine's Day. So in the film, they're at school, it's Valentine's Day, and someone tells Lara Jean that every year on Valentine's Day, Peter would always send her these school acapellas in the middle of class. So now we know Lara Jean's comparing herself to Jen, so now she's expecting to get a acapella. She doesn't get one, so now she's upset. But none of this happens in the book, right? What happens is Lara Jean is excited to give Peter his gift, right? She walks up and he's standing there with Genevieve, comforting her. And so obviously this upsets her because she's excited to see her boyfriend on Valentine's Day. However, he's standing there with his ex. Like I said, the film needed to have more scenes of Peter and Genevieve hanging out together, and they didn't. I don't know why this wasn't included. It probably would have been a lot easier to just show these two people having a conversation and talking than having a whole a cappella group and having to write that into the script. Anyways, in the film and in the book, Peter gives Lara Jean a necklace. So she's really honored, really excited. But what she really gets excited over is a poem that Peter wrote her, which also happens in the film. So in the book, she reads this poem and she is absolutely floored because we know her. She's romantic. She loves anything of this sort. And so when she reads this poem, she's so excited over this poem and she can't believe that Peter wrote her a poem. Even though, like, it was literally... It was like 2 stanzas long. Like, whenever I read that, I said, okay, Peter, give us nothing, even though he didn't write it and he copied it from a famous poet. But I was like, why is she so excited over it? It's like 2 stanzas long. Like, what? But anyways, in the film, we don't show how excited she is over this poem. She's touched, obviously, we see that, but we don't show how much this poem means to her, which is important because it's used as another issue in the relationship whenever she finds out he didn't write the poem. He plagiarized it from Edgar Allan Poe, which, okay, Peter, I understand, Peter. It was the thought that counts. You know, like, why would we expect Peter to know how to write a poem? We wouldn't. That's not him. But he knows that she likes poems and romantic gestures, so he did that for her. And I think it's the thought that counts. But it goes back to them always promising to be honest with each other, and he's not being honest with her about this poem, even if he was just withholding the truth and not necessarily outright lying about it. he wasn't completely truthful. So it becomes another point of conflict in their relationship. However, in the film, it's not really done that well because we don't see just how much this poem meant to her as we do in the book. So let's talk about John Ambrose. So in the second book and movie, Lara Jean receives a letter from John Ambrose McLaren, who was one of the boys who got a letter but didn't see it because the letter, he moved or something like, yeah, he moved away, and so he didn't get the letter. So going back to my other video about the first film slash movie, I said that I think they should have included little hints and little seeds of John Ambrose in the first film to set up for the second film, because I think it would have worked a lot better had we started bringing John Ambrose into the conversation in the first film, because he's such an important part in this next film. I think we could have set that up in the first film, especially since I think they planned to make this second film back when they made the first film, because we had that end credit scene with John Ambrose, who clearly is a different actor. But we had that scene at the end credits with him staying there with the letter. So we know that they were planning to hopefully make a second film, so they should have set that up. Anyways, the reason I think they should have set that up in the first film, because whenever Lara Jean tells us, the audience, that she got it from John Ambrose McLaren, we would have already known from the first film how important he was to her. And when she's telling Peter that she received a letter from John Ambrose McLaren, in this film, we would have known, one, that they all used to be friends, that him and John Ambrose used to be good buddies, good friends. Two, we would have known that he knows that Lara Jean liked John Ambrose, and that John Ambrose liked Lara Jean. And third, he would have clearly been a little bit more upset that he sent the letter, and a little bit more jealous that he sent the letter. This wasn't included in the films at all, but I'm kind of glad they didn't include it. But in the books, in the first book, going all the way back to the first book, Lara Jean started to wonder about John Ambrose McLaren to the point where she went to his Model UN competition thing just to go see him, which just shows yet again how this seed should have been planted in the first film. But anyways, she went to go see him at this thing, at this competition, to the point where she literally saw him face to face and then ran away. Like, girl, what? That's insane. And then just didn't ever do anything else about it because she didn't have any way to contact him or whatever because he hadn't gotten the letter yet. But isn't that crazy? She literally went to go see him, saw him, and then ran away. That's how much she likes John Ambrose McLaren. She went to go see how he turned out. Anyways, I'm glad that they didn't include that in the film because that's like, kind of insane, Lara Jean. Like, what? Also, an important detail that we find out through John Ambrose McLaren's letter is that John Ambrose and Lara Jean kissed in a game of Spin the Bottle, which if you watched my first video and the first film, it's stated that Lara Jean and Peter kissed in a game of Spin the Bottle, as opposed to what really happened in the book, which is Peter kisses Lara Jean, and that's her first kiss. I mean, obviously they didn't include that detail in the film that John Ambrose kissed Lara Jean in his game Spin the Bottle because they changed that in the film from the book. They already said that Peter did that. But I do think the fact that Lara Jean and John Ambrose kissed in a game of Spin the Bottle is an important detail because it shows how much she liked him. I mean, pretty similarly to Peter, because all of this kind of was overlapping at the same time. But she had kissed both Peter and John Ambrose, so it kind of shows like these crushes were both pretty equal. So in the film, Lara Jean decides, okay, I shouldn't write him back. I have a boyfriend. It's not a good idea. However, in the book, she says, no, I'm gonna write him back. And so they become pen pals and they start writing each other letters. She has a boyfriend and they're writing each other letters. And at one point, Peter gets jealous over this and he literally says, for somebody who's never had a boyfriend, you sure know how to work a guy, which they do include in the movie. And I love that they included that in the film. I'm very grateful that they included that. But I love it so much because quite literally, Lara Jean is a player. She's quite literally a player. And I love that we see that. Even in the first film slash movie, we have the whole line of, you're a player, Covey, whenever he's asking how many letters she sent out and she tells him 5. So yeah, I love that it's coming back to us with, you sure know how to work, guy. There's this scene in the film where her and John Ambrose are at the retirement home cleaning up or something, and John Ambrose kind of starts taking digs at Peter, and he starts making fun of him of like, remember when he used to do this and he used to do this, and Lara Jean's kind of like just nodding along. However, in the book, Lara Jean writes in her letter to John Ambrose and says, remember how Peter used to always take the last slice of pizza, and how he used to always do this and this, and she's literally making fun of him to John Ambrose. Like, mind you, they're dating. They're dating, and she's making fun of her boyfriend to her old crush that she's writing to. Like, crazy. Honestly, I feel like a lot of the choices in the film that were made regarding the whole love triangle were made trying to make Lara Jean look like a better person and also make Peter look like a better person. However, the whole reason of them, I mean, them both doing these like messed up things in the relationship is a part of the whole theme of choosing a relationship that's real and choosing a relationship that has its issues and its problems over choosing this perfect guy, right? So I think that was important to show. But yeah, Lara Jean is like doing some sketchy stuff, but so is Peter. I personally like in the book how she's, you know, a more complex character. She's doing some more questionable things, and I like that. I think it's more interesting. Also, there's a scene in the movie that I thought was done really well and pretty accurate to the book, and it's basically this scene of Lara Jean and Peter in the car, and they're kind of fooling around, but then Lara Jean starts having these comparisons to Genevieve in her head, and then she starts to get worried of, does he expect, because he did those things with Jen, does he expect to do those things with me and get more physical with me? And so they have this conversation about having sex and what does he expect from her. And I actually really like this conversation between them. I think it shows, you know, her concerns of being in a relationship for the first time. It kind of shows them transitioning from doing this fake dating thing to now being serious, and it kind of hitting her that this is real. And also it shows, you know, her comparisons to Jen and him and Jen's relationship. And I like that it shows that Peter's not trying to rush her into anything. He knows that it wouldn't be the same because her and Jen are not the same person, and he doesn't expect that from her. So I like the scene. I think it was actually done really well in the film. Another huge theme from this book that I think should have been incorporated more in the film was this whole theme of childhood and, you know, going, you know, in high school you're really transitioning from your childhood to becoming an adult. And I love this book so much because there's so many childhood elements. The whole thing with the treehouse, which is in the film, all of the whole thing with the time capsule party and all of their old friend group getting back together. I love all of it so much. I just think it could have been incorporated more in the film. I will say one aspect of the film I really loved is whenever she was reading John's letter, she would have these flashback moments between her and John when they were younger, and I wish we would have had more of those kind of flashback scenes, but with their whole friend group to, you know, really drive home that childhood theme. And then specifically a scene with her and Jen as best friends. And I'm so mad that this wasn't included in the film. Besides the whole involvement with Jen, I think that this is what I'm most mad about. The fact that they did not include the game of assassins in the film. Are you kidding me? That is such a good scene for a movie. Like, that's so fun, and you can create so many cool scenes with this game of having to, you know, find these people and tag them out, and not only that, but it was such a good way to have all these characters interact with each other, because they would never interact with each other otherwise, because all of these people, they're not friends anymore. So this game brought them all together. And not only that, that's also a way for Lara Jean and John Ambrose to get closer, because they become allies in this game after he gets tagged out. Which, by the way that they bring Lara Jean and John Ambrose together in the film is that they volunteer at the same retirement home together. However, that's not what happens in the book. What happens in the book is John Ambrose is Stormy's grandson, and so Stormy the whole time is pushing her grandson onto Lara Jean, which I think works really well and should have been incorporated into the film, because Stormy is also the one that's telling Lara Jean to go live this crazy life and go explore and go, you should have all these different lovers and all these different loves throughout your life. And so now she's pushing her grandson onto him. So Stormy's the one that's influencing Lara Jean a lot. I don't know, I just think this game would have been so fun for the film. I cannot possibly understand why they did not include it. And not only that, this game is so important for Lara Jean's character because it kind of goes back to the first film where all these characters are telling her how she's so innocent or she's a goody two-shoes and she has a reputation of being very innocent. And so similarly, in this second book, they say something along the lines of, well, you never could win this game when we were younger. Jen says something about you just never had killer instincts. So this, because Lara Jean has these previous feelings about being innocent and being perceived a certain way, and now she's having these insecurities of comparing herself to Jen. So now she's really upset about these comments, and she decides that in this game she's going to prove herself and she's going to win this game. And I think it's so interesting because it's almost not like a villain arc, but it's almost like she's so dead set to prove to these people that she can be evil, not evil, but she can win this game and she can be cutthroat too, that she kind of just like focuses in on this game. It becomes a little bit too important to her where it's like, okay, you shouldn't care this much, and she's so dead set on it. Quite literally, when she breaks up with Peter, it's while she's still playing this game and he's saying to her, I don't care about this game, I care about us right now. And she says, well, I do care about this game. And then she tags him out. She's like, well, we're broken up, and by the way, I'm gonna tag you out. Boop, you're out. Like, I don't know, I just really like this game, and I think that scene was so dramatic where she tags him out at the end after breaking up with him. Should have been included. Hello. And speaking of childhood elements, I love everything about the treehouse, both in the book and the film. I love that the treehouse is kind of the symbolism for their childhood. It was their spot that they would all hang out at, and now it's getting demolished and it's getting taken down. So it's kind of this symbol of their growing up and they're moving on from their childhood and they're kind of visiting it one last time. And the scene in the treehouse with the time capsule party was so good. Whenever I was rereading this, I was like, this is my favorite scene out of the whole book, and if they don't include it in the film, I'm gonna be pissed. Thank God they included it, and for the most part, it was pretty accurate to the book, and I thought it was done really well. And the reason this scene is so good is because there's so much tension in both the book and the film. It's literally like a recipe for disaster, and we love that. Because what's the best thing you can do when creating a story? Create tension. It doesn't matter what kind of tension, any kind of tension, that is good storytelling. And there was so much tension in this scene, so that's what makes it so good, because there's all these people who used to be really close, but now are not close, and they all have different dynamics with each other. So there's tension between John Ambrose and Peter because they used to be friends. There's tension between John Ambrose and Lara Jean because they are now reconnecting and they have crushes on each other. There's tension between Peter and Jen because they used to have a past together, and there's tension between Peter and Lara Jean because she's mad at him because he brought Jen to the function, which we'll get into. There's tension between Peter, John, and Lara Jean because now they have this love triangle going on. It's such a good scene. Like, everything about it, chef's kiss. But yeah, let's backtrack. This is a difference between the film and the book that is huge. So in the book, Peter shows up by himself. He walks up, Lara Jean and Ambrose are setting up. He's a little bit jealous, whatever. Then Genevieve comes and she says, where was my invite? And that's not what happens in the book at all. Like we said in the book, Peter and Genevieve were hanging out behind Lara Jean's back. Peter shows up with Genevieve after she intentionally didn't invite him. He shows up with her. They were hanging out together and they showed up together. So obviously, Lara Jean is now pissed. She's pissed at Peter because why would you bring her to the function that I didn't want her at, and why would you show up here with her? Why were you with her to begin with? I don't understand why they didn't show Genevieve and Peter still hanging out. Like, also I wanted to point out something that I noticed while reading the book is the dynamics between these love triangles are literally the opposite, just flip. So basically, Peter has been with both Lara Jean and Genevieve, who used to be best friends. But now, in this book, Lara Jean is with John Ambrose and Peter, who used to be best friends. So I think that was such an interesting dynamic that has been flipped around. Yeah, let's get into it actually, because John, in the book specifically, Love him. Like, I could not help but ship him and Lara Jean. It's crazy. In the film, they really don't show how good of a guy John Ambrose was. Because in the book, I'm like, yeah, like, I ship them. I literally ship them. He's like, if you don't want him, girl, give him to me. Like, he's perfect. He's literally the perfect guy. And not even that, like, they had really good chemistry together. And so I think they could have shown that more in the film of him being like this perfect guy. And talking about the big party at the end, which in the film is like the Star Ball something, but in the movie it's like this 40 something. We did not see nearly enough of this scene with her and John, because when I tell you the scene in the book, John Ambrose is like the perfect man. Like, this night that they have together it's like out of a movie, quite literally, which you would think if it can be out of the movie in the book, why wouldn't it be something out of a movie in an actual movie? I don't know. Tell me why. I don't know. Tell me why. Also, let's reinforce the fact that this was supposed to tie back into the theme of love from the past, and that's why it should have been set in the 40s, which we didn't see in the film. But anyways, John pulls up in this vintage car, and mind you, he's dressed like to a T from the 40s. He has the side part, he has the hat, he has the soldier's outfit, and obviously to Lara Jean, this is everything, because we know her. We know she's a romantic. We know that she loves to dress up. So the fact that he's so committed to this is so attractive to her. It's literally like her dream man. So what do? They go to the party, and guess what? It's stated in the book that John Ambrose hates dancing. What did he do? He took dance lessons so that he could dance with Lara Jean at this party. Like, hello. He's perfect. He's perfect in the book. And maybe that's why they didn't make him so perfect in the film, because he wouldn't be able to compete with Peter. That's probably why. That honestly is probably why. And the crazy thing is that the love triangle was done so well in this book, but not done well at all like in the film. Like, I don't know. Honestly, in the film I was watching this and I was like, where's the romance? Like, I don't care if she ends up with either of them, because I don't feel romance between either of her options. But in this book I was so torn. I was like, girl, you could choose either and I would be happy with either. Like, I love John Ambrose and I love Peter. Love them both. But in the film I was like, girl, I don't even care. Anyways, we're gonna come back to this retirement home party, but we have to backtrack a little bit. So in the book, John Ambrose and Lara Jean plan to work together to tag out Peter. So Peter has kind of been mentioning to Lara Jean that he really wants her to go to his games, and she has been canceling the last couple of times. So what happens is Lara Jean says, I can't come to your game again, but she's secretly planning to tag team with John to the game, surprise him there, and tag Peter out, right? However, when she shows up to his game and he's not there, and she's like, what the hell, he would never miss a game. And so then she finds out from one of his teammates that he didn't show up to the game and that it was a family emergency. So obviously she's really worried about him. She texts him, he doesn't answer. She's really worried because he would never miss a game. And so now she's concerned. So John Ambrose drives her to Peter's house. And what do they see when they pull up? Peter is standing there hugging Genevieve. Lara Jean is upset because they've been having this issues with Peter continuing to hang out with Genevieve and not telling Lara Jean the reason why. And now he misses a game, which is something that he would never do. He misses a game for her. How is this shown in the film? She goes to his game. Chris comes up to her and says, look what I saw. It's not good. Flipped her phone around. Wicked witch. Sorry. Flips her phone around. It's a picture of Jen and Peter talking to each other. So even if they didn't have this aspect of the assassin's game in the film, you're telling me there wasn't a way for her to walk up to this game and somehow see him comforting Genevieve? Like, why would you just show a pic? Like, let her see it with her own eyes. Let her see him hug her and holding her close to him. So in the book, Lara Jean obviously confronts him and says, what the hell? Like, what is this? He's trying to explain himself to her, which, by the way, I wanted to mention when I was reading the book, I was so proud of her for confronting Peter because she really did speak all of her feelings, and I think that this is a great moment for her to where she's being very clear and very direct about her feelings, and I think that's very great. We've come a long way from her, you know, kind of avoiding confrontation, because no, she's confronting him in this scene. Anyways, in this conversation, she finds out that at some point Peter found out that Genevieve was in fact the person who took the video of them in the hot tub. So when Lara Jean finds this out, obviously it hurts, because he was defending her so much and not believing his own girlfriend. And that is why it hits so hard in the book, but not in the film. In the film, when she finds out that Peter knew about the hot tub video, that Genevieve took it, it's not effective at all, because we never set up that this was a conflict between them and how big of a deal this was and how he wasn't taking his own girlfriend's side. So after that, double homicide, it's a triple homicide, because then she says, wait a minute, why was Genevieve out there that night to begin with? And then it clicks in her head, he was waiting for her in the hot tub. And that, had she not gone down there, they probably would have gotten back together, which they did mention in the film. That is what ultimately causes her to break up with them. So anyways, back to the party. In the book, Peter and Lara Jean, they're broken up. John Ambrose, Lara Jean, at this party, they're leaving. Lara Jean's walking outside. Who does she run into? Peter and Genevieve. Again! They're hanging out together again! So automatically she assumes, first thing she assumes is, oh my gosh, Genevieve's here to tag me out, because they're still playing the game. And then she's like, wait, are y'all back together? And Peter's like, no, we're not back together. Wait, why are you here? And then guess who pulls around? John Ambrose pulls around in the car, and he says, wait a damn minute, why are you here with him? Why are y'all dressed up? And then he says, is this a date? Is this a date? And you know what? It might as well be. It might as well be, Peter, because since you want to hang out with Genevieve every single damn day and not give me a good reason why. Anyways, I love this scene so much. It's so fun, because then Lara Jean runs around, because they're still in the Assassin's game, runs around, gets in the car with John Ambrose, and they speed off, and they look behind them, and Genevieve and Peter are gagged. Literally. None of that was in the film. This scene is something out of a movie, yet you didn't put it in the movie. This whole night, this whole party of the 40s theme, and him dressing in the 40s costume and her dressing up in the 40s, and them dancing, and then seeing Peter and Genevieve and speeding off together, and then having a great time and kissing in the car, like all of this is something that would be out of a movie, right? No. Apparently not. So anyways, it's Lara Jean's birthday at school, and guess who pulls up to school? Her new man, John Ambrose McLaren, and he gives her a gift. And what is it? It's a snow globe. So he gives her a snow globe for her birthday. And then guess who approaches? Peter. And he says, you know what? No, I'm gonna fight my way back for you. And by the way, here's your necklace. Because I forgot to mention this, but in the book, he asked for her necklace back, which was like so tacky and so classless of him. Like, hello, you don't give a gift just to ask for it back just because y'all broke up. That was crazy. But anyways, he gives her necklace back, and he says, you know what? I'm gonna fight for you, Lara Jean. I don't care. Like, I'm not gonna let you go. And so now she has this choice between the two of them. Did that happen in the film? No, it didn't, which was so interesting, because they included in the film in the beginning, they had Peter give Lara Jean the snow globe that John Ambrose gave her in the book. And so I thought, I wasn't even mad at it when I watched that, because I thought, oh, that's going to come full circle at the end whenever Peter gives it to her, whenever he's trying to win her back. That never happened. He never had to win her back. He never had to win her back. He never took the initiative and said, no, I'm going to fight for you. He never did that in the film. What happened is, at that party, John Ambrose and Lara Jean went into the back while it was snowing, and then they kissed, and she said, no, it's Peter. And then she walked outside, Peter was there, and she said, it's you. And then they made up, and that was the end. Why is that scene in the film not good? Because by her kissing John, and that being the confirmation that she needed to end up with Peter, took away the weight of her decision. Because in the book, she has chemistry with both Peter and John. She likes John. She kisses John, and it's a good kiss. She loves Peter, and she can see herself falling in love with John as well. So that adds a lot more pressure to her decision. But ultimately, she chooses Peter because it's more real to her. And yeah, it's a little bit messy, but she would rather have something real over some dream guy that she's kind of romanticizing in her head. And in the book, when she's trying to choose between them, she says, who would I regret losing more, the reality of Peter or the dream of John? And so that was not shown in the film. So yeah, in conclusion, I don't think that the love triangle was really done well at all in the film. So the book ends with Peter and Lara Jean in the treehouse, and this is where they get back together, and she chooses him, and they confess their love to each other, which they do say I love you at the end of this film. However, it's not effective because at the first film, they said I love you at the end of that film, which they didn't do in the first book. And I said that when I watched the first film, I said, I wish they wouldn't have done this because their romance wasn't fleshed out enough to the point where they should be saying I love you. And that's why it hits so much harder in the book, because they haven't said I love you yet. And now they've gone through all of these things, but they've come back together stronger. So when they're saying I love you, it's a lot more meaningful. However, in the film, they had said I love you before, so it didn't hit as hard because they have already said it to each other. And I like how they end up making up in the treehouse, and this is their last time in the treehouse before it gets demolished, and it's symbolizing the end of their childhood and how now they're growing up and their relationship is a lot more real. And they do show this in the film by showing a shot of them walking away together while the treehouse is being demolished. So I'll give them that. I'll give them that. So yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on the book versus the film. I clearly like the book better. Yeah, but I do think it's worth mentioning that they changed directors for this movie. So the first film was directed by a woman. The second film and the third film were directed by a man. Yeah, of course it's not going to be the same. It's a man. This series was written by a woman for women. Why would you hire a man to direct it? But yeah, even though this film kind of pissed me off, I still had such a fun time watching this movie and reading this book and doing the comparison, so I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you've read both the book and the film, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you like the film better? Do you like the book better? Do you like them both? What are your thoughts? But yeah, I hope you liked this video. I'm excited to do the last film slash book in this whole series and wrap this whole thing up. I've been having a lot of fun doing these films and analyzing them, but yeah, I hope you liked this video and thanks for hanging out with me.